Hello my friends, welcome to this weekend's video where, can I just say, like, this corner of my house, I feel as if when I film here, I'm allowed to be more casual than normal. Like, this video doesn't have a lot of structure. I don't really have a plan. I don't really know what I'm going to talk about yet. And every time I have a video idea like this, I sit right here. And I don't know if it's like the half decent lighting compared to normal or what it is, but this corner, I feel safe. I feel like I can just blabber and you're okay with it. So what I did is I grabbed every single anthology that I've ever read, and I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna go through all of them, and I'm gonna talk about the stories that I have rated the highest and do a kind of assessment of the authors and if I've read from them since. Because something that I love to say is I really think my favorite stories in here were by the authors that I already knew and loved. But I also got introduced to a couple authors, which is my favorite thing about anthologies, because I get a little taste of someone's writing and then I want to read everything by them. In fact, I'm actually like a broken record about it. I talk about it all the time. I used to read so many YA anthologies, like it was so much a part of my brand. And now as I read less and less YA, and I read more and more short story collections just from one singular author, which is like that whole stack back there, this just doesn't really sum up my reading right now. But I know a lot of people who watch me are still interested in YA anthologies and ask for recommendations sometimes. So I thought I would just go through all of the ones I've read, what I rated them, and then Zach gave me this video idea where I talk through like the authors that I say I want to read from now since reading a short story from them, and have I actually read a novel from them? And do I have a novel from them on my TBR shelf? And to take it a step further, like if I look at all of the anthologies I still have that I haven't read, are there some here that feature a lot of the authors that I've previously given 5 stars and therefore should prioritize? I think I am talking myself into building a TBR with this video, but I don't know yet. It depends what comes out of this. Perhaps if I go through these YA anthologies and I've loved an author, like some of these I read 5-6 years ago, maybe they have written adult books and I should check those out. I'm sure we'll come to some kind of conclusion by the end of this video of what I actually want to do from here. Last time I sat here and I talked about like my favorite authors, so I'm kind of doing the same thing, but I divided up this stack into 2 things. One is ones where I didn't tab individual stories. So like maybe I originally read arcs and I've picked up a physical copy since, so there's no tabs, there's no ratings, but I can look back on YouTube videos and Goodreads reviews and see which stories I considered my favorites. And then these ones are all tabbed, or I just doodled on the actual book itself, on the title page of each story, and said my rating. I've got my laptop ready so I can look at the Goodreads pages of all of these authors who, like, prior to the anthology I had never read from. If I've read from them since, I'll talk about that, but if I haven't, I can look at their body of work. Let's start with the couple middle grade ones I have, because I actually rated both of these pretty high. This is Once Upon an Eid, all Muslim stories, Muslim characters, and I said in this one in my review that my favorites were by the editors themselves. So that's S.K. Lee and Aisha Saeed. These authors are why I picked up this anthology to begin with. I'm not going to pull out a book as an example every single time because that would take way too long, but this one was right here. So Love from A to Z is one of my favorites from S.K. Lee. And then I said the other story I loved was by Hannah Alcalf, which is so interesting because I had a couple of her books on my TBR. I picked up this before that, and since then I have rated both of her things like 4.5 stars. So yes, this one was true, got introduced to new authors, and I've read from them since and enjoyed them. Perfect case scenario. Then we have Flying Lessons. I don't really remember if this one had a theme, but checking the tabs, the very first story in here is by Matt De La Pena, and I gave it 5 stars. His name's really familiar. I think I've read from him in a couple anthologies. The thing is, some authors, that's all they do is short stories, and then some have full novels. He definitely does. Oh, he also wrote for the My True Love Gave to Me anthology. We'll talk about that one next then. Oh, and that was actually my only 5-star in here, though I gave the anthology overall 4 stars. Most of the stories were 3 and 4. Next, we've got My True Love Gave to Me, and then after that came Summer Days and Summer Nights. These are related in that they're like seasonal love stories, and this one was like a booktube darling in its day. Everybody loved it. I also think we were just like hurting for good Christmas and holiday recommendations. So this was just in every list ever. And then this one came out, I want to say a year later maybe, and I thought it was way better. Something that's also fun about anthologies is sometimes the story is so good in it, like one of them, that it becomes a full published book on its own from that author. I absolutely love the title pages in here. Ooh, I wrote a review on Goodreads for every single one of them. So my favorites were Midnights by Rainbow Rowell, and then Krampuslauf by Holly Black. I said, I'm obsessed with whatever the hell that was. And no, I have not read from Holly Black since. I DNF'd one of her books, and then a lot of her other things have to do with fairies and things I don't think I'm interested in. But I was considering reading Book of Night because I thought, yeah, it was like her adult debut, but I've only seen absolutely terrible things about it. So I took it off my TBR. Then in this one, I did tab everything. The very first story in here I gave 5 stars, and that was called Head, Scales, Tongue, Tail by Leigh Bardugo. I must have read this in 2016 when it came out, which means I think that was my introduction to Leigh Bardugo, which is weird to think about. So I guess, yeah, after I read this, I picked up the entire Shadow and Bone trilogy, which was okay, and then Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which was great, and then Ninth House, which was also not great for me. So that's a win. I continued with the author. We've definitely got a lot of authors in here that I've heard of, that I've read from a lot before, but just focusing on the 5 stars. I gave Inertia by Veronica Roth 5 stars. I feel like this is something that people talk about that got turned into its own story. I have such a bad memory when it comes to short stories. I don't remember them at all. And then authors will come out with a full novel inspired by one of their short stories, and I will never remember what happened in it. Also gave Tim Federley and his Souvenirs story 5 stars. Okay, here's what I've already decided is I'm gonna do a vlog in, let's say, September or October, where I reread some of my favorite 5-star stories and see if they hold up. I recognize quite a few of his covers, but I haven't been interested in them. So in that vlog, let's do a reread of some short stories, and then let's do a book on my TBR for one of these authors that I've given 5 stars. Hopefully that pops up. And then an anthology or 2 featuring authors that I've given 5 stars. Let's do it. I'm committed. One of my favorite short story collections of all time is Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time. This is an adult anthology, and then this one came out after, and some of the stories are connected. They're like sequels, but some of them stand alone. And this is the anthology that I got introduced to Darcy Little Badger. And I would love to reread this story. So you can see I just wrote 5 stars on it. I also gave 5 stars to the Nathan Adler. I also gave 5 stars to the David A. Robertson. Just realizing how boring this video might be since I'm not telling you what the stories are about because I don't remember. And I gave everything else like 4.5 stars. Oh, interesting. Nathan Adler has a short story collection of his own with 13 stories. It's called Ghost Lake. Might be picking that up. And in this one, we have another Nathan Adler, but I didn't rate it. Weird. The next one in it, Adam Garnett Jones, I gave 5 stars. And then I also gave 5 stars to the Gabriel Castillo Calderson and the David A. Robertson. Again, he's definitely written quite a few things. Looks like a lot of nonfiction. Okay, things to consider there. Obviously, I'm also going to take your comments into account if you feel like there's an author that I need to read something from, because clearly we're going to have a lot of things to choose from by the end. This is the Shakespeare anthology edited by Dahlia Adler. There's also an Edgar Allan Poe one. I will be rereading The Fall of the House of Usher soon because it's what inspired What Moves the Dead, which is the August book club selection for the Literally Dead book club by T. Kingfisher. After the sci-fi indigenous anthologies I just talked about, these are 2 of my absolute all-time favorite anthologies. Looking through my ratings, my favorite in here was the one based on Taming of the Shrew by Kate Ancrum. I picked this up because I love Kate Ancrum. Also gave 5 stars to the Anna Marie Muclemore, which is not surprising. Read everything from them. Also 5 stars to the Lily Anderson, who I've read from before. Loved one book, disliked one book. And then I gave 5 stars to the Dahlia Adler, which I don't think I've ever read a full-length novel from her, but I know she's been a part of so many of these collections, so I feel like that needs to be a thing. I know everyone's talking about home field advantage right now, and I do have Cool for the Summer on my TBR, and it is summertime. Also gave 5 stars to the Brittany Cavallaro, who I haven't read a full-length novel from, but I read the collaboration she had with Emily Henry that I really didn't like. Oh, she's the one who wrote the Charlotte Holmes series. Okay. I think she's someone I'll keep my eye out for adult books in the future, but I'm not interested in, I don't think, anything from her backlist. Also gave 5 stars to Kirsten White, who I've since read 2 books from, liked one, didn't like one. One was actually a book club selection, but this was my intro to her, and I have read something since, so that's exciting. And then in My Hideous Heart, I originally had an ARC, so my ratings are not in here, but they are available in a video. I gave out 3 5-star reviews for this. They were like glowing reviews, even though I recommend this generally. There were 3 that really stood out. One was by Rin Chipeko, wrote The Bone Witch, Wicked as You Wish, but I haven't picked up anything since, so we must remember that. I also gave 5 stars to the Dahlia Adler. Then I also gave 5 stars to the Stephanie Kuhn in here, inspired by the Telltale Heart. And I have since picked up a Stephanie Kuhn. It was in my lowest rated books on my TBR video, and I gave it 5 stars. So that's a 1 out of 3 success for that anthology. Next we have Meet Cute, which was not one of my favorites. I think I gave everything in here 3 stars, but let's see if, oh, there's one standout. Catherine McGee wrote something called Click. Ooh, also Emery Lord got 5 stars. I haven't read an Emery Lord since this, but I did read her prior. And I've never heard of Catherine McGee. Is she the one who wrote the Crash Into Me series, or am I thinking of someone else? Oh no, she wrote a whole series about royalty and also is the 1000th Floor author. So not particularly interested in her. Oh, the author I was thinking of for Crash Into You was Katie McGarry. Close, but not the same. Next, the book that inspired this whole video and the comment that I got from Zach is the Dark Stars book, which, can I even recall what I rated these? I just read this. These are all horror stories. The last one, Meet Cute, is all about meet cutes. Oh yeah, the authors in here that I'd read from before are the ones I gave the lowest ratings to, which was definitely weird. But the story by John F.D. Taff, who is the editor, that one blew all the other stories out of the water. And he definitely has a lot of horror books that I could look into. What do you think? Anything that stands out to you? Horror lovers, let me know. Ooh, he does have some more anthologies though. This one's called I Can Taste Blood. Oh yeah, my other 5-star was to Alma Katsu. Right, and I have recently picked up a book from her. I think it's The Hunger, because that one's a vampire-y one. I can't remember now. Next up, we have I See Reality, which I remember not really liking, and it's 12 short stories about real life, whatever that means. This was a pretty big flop. Everything was 3 stars. Oh, or 1 star from what I remember. Yeah, no 5s. Then we have Toil and Trouble, which is a witchy anthology. And this one I think will be interesting because maybe if these authors have full-length witchy novels, I should pick them up, because I think at this time I didn't love witch stories, and now obviously I very much do. One of them is by Brandy Colbert, which I was not expecting because her stuff is typically really realistic, and maybe this story was. I should definitely reread that one. The Truth About Queenie. I have read Brandy Colbert since. I actually did a 3rd Times a Charm video with her. And then my other 5 stars were from The Usual Suspects. Again, Anna Marie McLemore and Emery Lord. I seem to prefer Emery Lord's short stories over full-length books. So maybe I should see if there's any other short stories from her that I have yet to read. No. It looks like I've read both of her short stories. Ooh, but she does have a 2023 release. Next up, I have Because You Love to Hate Me, which is a villain anthology. This one wasn't super popular. It came out in 2017. It was popular as in a lot of people picked it up, but it also got a lot of low ratings. I gave it 3.75 in total. This was like a booktube collaboration. So all of the short stories in here from authors have a little intro. They were like given a prompt by a booktuber, which is so fun. And this is the most thorough of a review I've ever written. In fact, I kind of want to delete it from Goodreads because I feel like it might be a little too harsh reflecting on it now. I gave A. Marie's story 5 stars. I remember it being so good. It was called Jack. I don't think A. Marie's written a full-length like fiction novel, but she also had a story in A Phoenix Must First Burn, which I don't remember what my rating was for. I'll have to look at that in just a sec. My other 5-star was to Susan Dennard. This is interesting because it's a story about Watson Holmes and Moriarty, which isn't something like any story that's been inspired by that I haven't enjoyed. So I'm really shocked to be reminded that I gave Susan Dennard 5 stars. And I was just talking about witches, so that seems interesting. Is that something I'm feeling like I should commit to right now? I don't know. I guess so, because if she can make the type of story that I don't typically like 5 stars, like, I guess I should read her witchy books. I also gave 5 stars to the Victoria Schwab. I think this was my introduction to Victoria Schwab, which is cool. And of course, I've read so many things since then. This says it was a powerful personal letter to death. Oh no, that was Jessie's contribution. Oh yeah, Jessie's contribution was so good in here. But in Victoria Schwab's story, she personified death. Definitely got to reread that. And those were my 5 stars from there. Next up was a recent read, Vampires Never Get Old. These are all vampire stories. Shocking, I know. And I remember saying that I was kicking off my vampire era with this. Rebecca Roanhorse was absolutely my favorite in here. I'm pretty sure one of these has a story by Rebecca Roanhorse. That's the one that introduced me to her. And then I read Trail of Lightning and Black Sun, which everyone was like, it's so weird that you picked these up. It doesn't seem to be your usual thing. But it was because I'd read short stories from her. And then I read that one afterwards and gave it 5 stars. And the other 5 star in here was by Kayla Whaley, who I have read from in other things, but they were nonfiction anthologies. I also think I need to do a video about nonfiction anthologies, probably like a year from now, because when I was looking back on some videos to find out ratings for certain things, I stumbled upon a couple reviews of essay collections, and I said things like, this is my favorite essay of all time, and like, have I read from those authors full-length things? Probably not. Anyway, then we have this duo, which is A Tyranny of Petticoats. Jessica Spotswood edited that, and then after came The Radical Element. So these are like historical kind of feminist stories. This, I feel like, is probably one of the earliest anthologies that I read. Lots of 3s. I think I rated this overall a 3. Beth Revis was a 5 star to me. Pearls, set in 1876 Chicago. I read a Beth Revis finally after all of these years, and it didn't go great, but that's okay. I also gave 5 stars to the Marissa Meyer. My Post-its upside down. Gold in the Roots of the Grass, 1877. I'm not interested in Marissa Meyer's series. She has a lot of things I know are really popular. They just do not interest me, but let me commit to rereading that story because I'd be interested to see if my thoughts hold up. I think I remember picking this one up after and liking it even less, but my rating overall was probably still a 3. 5 stars to the Danielle Clayton. I have read Tiny Pretty Things, which was a collaboration between her and Sona Charapatra, and then I was thinking about reading the sequel, never picked it up, but I have read a lot of short stories from her. Like, I think she's in quite a few of the ones coming up. Next up, we have Dangerous Women. And I know that people are always surprised that I have read Dangerous Women and Rogues because they're like big adult fantasy anthologies, but I love fantasy short stories. And I have the Book of Magic and the Book of Swords that I'm thinking about reading. So let's see if this will get me to do that. There are no 5 stars in here, but maybe Rogues is different because I have talked about how this is one of my favorite short story collections, but I read this as an e-book originally so far back in the day that there are no ratings in here. Goodreads tells me that my favorites were from Neil Gaiman, Gillian Flynn, Scott Lynch, and Patrick Rothfuss. I know that Gillian Flynn's was my favorite in here because it was originally called What Do You Do? And then it got published as its own short story and renamed The Grown Up. I'm looking at it, it's really far away. Patrick Rothfuss I've tried reading and have not had success with. Neil Gaiman I have read and haven't had success with, but Scott Lynch I have not. His story in here is called A Year and a Day in the Old Theridane, and it's about wizards. I think I'm gonna have to reread this one. I don't feel like I'm gonna commit to the idea of reading, I don't know, like The Lies of Locke Lamora, but I do recommend that anthology, which is different from the next 2 because we're gonna breeze past them because I didn't give a single 5 star to any of the stories in here. We've got Those Who Make Us, Canadian Creature, Myth, and Monster stories. I remember liking a few, but a lot of them I just did not understand. And then Welcome Home is a series of adoption related stories, but a lot of them, like the adoption wasn't actually a real part of the story, which is fine, but not the kind of stories that I was looking for, I guess. Moving swiftly along, we have Hungry Hearts. This is like cultural stories about food. Oh, this is the one that had Rebecca Roanhorse. So I gave 5 stars to the Rebecca Roanhorse, 5 stars to the Anna Marie McLemore, 5 stars to Sandy Menon. Was this before or after Dimple Met Rishi? Either way, they're both 5 stars. 5 stars to the S.K. Ali. This is probably before I picked up Love from A to Z. So all of those authors I've read from in other capacities. The only one I didn't is Phoebe North. I don't even think I know who that author is. Oh, Strange Creatures. I've seen this cover. Moving on, Three Sides of a Heart. This is one of this entire stack that I have nothing to offer you. I don't know if it's when I read the book and like the way that I was reviewing, but I gave absolutely nothing in my Goodreads review, in my YouTube review. I said, here's what I said. All of the stories were either terrible or awesome. So that obviously means there were 5 stars in here. These are all like love triangles, obviously. And I remember being disappointed by so many, but I have no way of knowing what the 5 stars were. Authors we have in here are Natalie C. Parker, who's in a ton of anthologies, Katie Kotugno, who I've loved books from, Justina Ireland, I've read from her, Ray Carson, Renee Attier, Julie Murphy, Garth Nix, Veronica Roth, E.K. Johnston, Brandy Colbert, Lamar Giles, Seba Tahir, Brenna Yavanoff, Alaya Dawn Johnson, Tessa Granton, and Bethany Hagen. Then we have Black Enough, which is another one of my all-time most recommended favorite anthologies, one of the few that I've ever given 5 stars. This one I read an arc of and then I passed it along to another reviewer, so I didn't write down anything in here once I bought myself a copy. But I did thankfully give a list of my favorites in the wrap-up that I read this, the month that I read this in. Justina Ireland, again, who I've read from since. I don't have any interest in anything else. E.B. Zaboy I gave 5 stars. E.B. Zaboy is one of the reasons that I wanted to read this because I love everything she writes. Brandy Colbert, again, was a favorite. Danielle Clayton, again, was a favorite. Nick Stone, and Renee Watson. So these are all authors I had already read from before picking this one up. Have I read from them since though? Well, I did read from some of them again because I read Blackout, which I did not like. I think I remember saying they all weren't very good. I loved one though, and it was everybody else's least favorite. I'm gonna have to go back and look at my review. Okay, it was Tiffany D. Jackson, which is not a surprise because I absolutely love her books. I've read all of them, and she has one of my most like, if I'm still gonna pick up a YA horror, it's Tiffany D. Jackson. She has The Weight of Blood, which is a Carrie retelling coming out soon. I'm gonna eat it up, I just know it. And her story is running through the entire thing, and it helps introduce different characters, and then each of the other authors is writing a romance that exists just like once throughout the book, and I don't think I liked any of them. Next up, that was A Phoenix Must First Burn, which is one of my favorite anthologies as well. This is the one that has Amory in it. I need to find out. Just so curious if I gave that one 5 stars. Okay, I didn't, but I gave 5 stars to the Rebecca Roan horse again. Okay, that's enough to make me look and see if she's been featured in any other anthologies that I have, for sure. And then I had a favorite by L.L. McKinney, who I've read from and enjoyed her Alice in Wonderland retelling, even though I still haven't read Alice in Wonderland. And then E.B. Zaboy was a favorite. And then one I said was Gilded was the name of the story, but I didn't say who the author of that one was. Oh, it's Elizabeth Acevedo, of course. So yet again, this was an anthology I picked up because it was authors that I had already loved, and then I continued to love their stories. Another culturally inspired story by one of the same editors as Hungry Hearts, Elsie Chapman. I definitely have, which ones in here are edited by Ellen O? I feel like I see her a lot. Anyway, this is historical stories. Historical fiction isn't something that I find myself picking up a lot, but when it's a short story and it's just like 30 to 50 pages, I'm totally invested. I'm totally down to read it. And I only wrote down my ratings on a few of these tabs. Goodreads tells me that my favorites were by Elsie Chapman, Roshani Chokski, Sona Charapatra, Aisha Saeed, and I also said that I hated the Renee Attier, and I was really sad about it. This is all Asian mythology inspired stories. I know Roshani Chokski has written The Gilded Wolves and The Star-Touched Queen, which a lot of people love. And then I did read Arusha on the End of Time with Liam. Now I can't remember if we finished it, but The Gilded Wolves is something that like haunts me a little bit. I feel like there have been a couple different opportunities for me to pick that up for various videos, and then I didn't. So let me know if you think I would like it. I don't think I even know the plot. But yes, I have read from the authors in there. And then this is again a favorite 5-star anthology I talk about all the time. It's called All Out, and these are queer stories from history. This is a series of anthologies. There's also Out Now, which is current stories, and then there's another one about futuristic stories. This one I was kindly sent an ARC, so I don't have my ratings in here, but I wrote down that my favorites were by Sean David Hutchinson, who I've read a lot from, Dahlia Adler, again, good to know. And then Melinda Lowe, who has written for quite a few anthologies, and this was the only short story of hers that I ever enjoyed. I guess the only writing I've enjoyed from her, because I haven't liked her books either. But I do have plans to finally read Last Night of the Telegraph Club very soon. Not for this kind of spin-off video we're talking about building a TBR for, but I will be reading it soon. Let me go ahead and jot down, though, her story New Year to reread in the spin-off video. And then lastly, one of the very first anthologies I ever read, Slasher Girls and Monster Boys. And something that I know for a fact about this is I've read from many of the authors that I disliked in here. And I don't know what that's about. I just remember actively not liking the stories by April Genevieve Teholke or Marie Lu, and then I like immediately picked up novels from them. But my favorites in here were the stories by Nova Rensuma, which I have read from, and I really liked that book. I haven't read from her since. And then I really liked Hide and Seek by Megan Shepherd, which is a story I remember. Like, I remember that title and the impact that it had, even though I don't remember what the story was. I think that would also be a fun reread. Although Megan Shepherd as a name does not ring a bell. Oh, she wrote The Madman's Daughter, which is a cover that very much appeals to me, and I think I've had that recommended. I think what I'm going to have to do is reread those short stories at the beginning of the vlog and then decide if I want to read a full book from that author for each of them. And then as far as collections that I own, let me just skim through the list of authors and see if anything jumps out at me that I just talked about authors that I like. Okay, some learnings I've had. I have read from Adam Garnett Jones. Seanan McGuire contributes to a lot of anthologies that I've picked up but haven't yet read. A lot of the short stories I just held up for you are actually by one singular author that I already knew, but I just grabbed the stack off my shelf thinking it was anthologies, but it was actually like a mix of ones by a lot of authors and ones from just one. There is a story in the Book of Magic also by Scott Lynch, so once I reread his one from Rogues, I'll decide if I want to read his one in here. I obviously want to read all of these things, otherwise I wouldn't have them. And then I'm also going to read After Sundown, because I think just the spooky anthology would make sense in this vlog, because I only mentioned my favorite in here, but I gave 4.5 stars to Ramsey Campbell and John Langan's stories, who are both featured in here. Also, CJ Tudor is in here, who has an entire short story collection coming out of just her own work, and I've only read her books, not her short stories, so I'd like to see if her writing style lends well to that. Also, Grady Hendrix is in here, and haven't read a short story from him, so this just sounds like fun. And then Scott Lynch also has a story in Book of Swords, which I didn't pull out. I don't know why it's in my TBR closet for some reason. I'm just interested to know if Scott Lynch is for me, because he has some books that are popular. So I've got some highly rated short stories I plan on rereading. I've got some anthologies planned that I want to check out based on authors that are featured in them. And then there's a recently published anthology on my magical TBR, not my physical TBR, that I've been putting off picking up because I don't know if I should keep picking up YA anthologies, but it has all of the authors that I've listed as favorites are in it. And obviously that's why it's on my TBR, but it's not just like authors that I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen them before. Like they were my 5 stars. It's called A Universe of Wishes. I've talked about it. It was on my most anticipated reads of 2020. And it has Danielle Clayton, Anna Marie McLemore, Tochi Onyebuchi, Marco Shiro, who I didn't feature earlier, but I've given like all of his short stories 4 stars. We've also got Rebecca Roanhorse in here, who like definitely needs a moment. Nick Stone and V.E. Schwab. There's a couple other people, which is awesome to get introduced to them. And then there's one coming out in November called At Midnight, which I obviously can't read for this specific vlog, but I just wanted to mention because it has like Darcy Little Badger and Melinda Lowe, Anna Marie McLemore, and Dahlia Adler. So I will be picking up that fairy tale reimagining because it's another Dahlia Adler edit. Maybe I can tag her in this video and I'll see if I can get an arc, and then I can read it if arcs are available by September. Just an idea. And then lastly, I have a whole bunch of books to choose from if you want to offer me your advice, your thoughts, things that you think I will like. These are a bunch of things that I'm considering. These are a bunch of things I'm considering from the authors that I just talked about. So I know that this was a lengthy video. It was just a lot of blabbering, which is the safe space for this corner. I know it probably didn't offer you as much as maybe you or I hoped it would as far as recommendations go or thorough reviews, but I just wanted to do like a statistical analysis of the authors that I've loved because it was just such a fun video idea for me to just film in one afternoon. Thank you so much for watching. I'm excited to read all of your comments to see what you think, and I'll see you later. Bye.